Well, welcome everyone to Beyond Motherhood, another week here on the podcast. And I am really happy to have another guest on the podcast this week. I have the lovely Markella Kaplani, all the way from Greece, here today. And we are going to be chatting all around mum guilt and shame. And Markella is a psychologist, and I'm really excited to have her share her wisdom and knowledge around this topic, because if you've been in my world for a while, it's something I do speak to quite a lot as well. But I always think it's great to hear from other people in different areas of expertise to speak to these things. So welcome, Markella, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my honor to be here.
Amazing. So I guess just first of all, I'd love for you to share with the audience a bit more about who you are and what you do and some of your passions and anything else you feel called to share.
Sure. Who I am, that's a difficult question. I've never been able to answer it and feel like it's a full answer, and I think that's how most of us feel. We are very multi-layered, and especially in motherhood, we become something different than we keep on becoming. So, a few things would be I'm multi-passionate. I like to do a lot of things. I like to learn. If I could learn everything about anything and everything, I would. And what I do is I'm a clinical counseling psychologist. I've been doing that for over 15 years, along with being a special educator. But after becoming a mother, I grew a passion for working with mothers. I started seeing things that I had some kind of a window to before. And I was especially I became very passionate about the fact that mothers get such heat about things. They get all the blame, quote unquote, about anything that goes wrong, let's say, but they don't get enough support or at all. So I became very passionate about why does this happen? And I started working a lot with moms. And as I started working a lot with moms and working on the guilt and the shame that comes with motherhood, which is an emotion that I had the privilege of not having felt really in my life. But then after becoming a mother, all this guilt started rushing in. As I worked with mothers, I realized that this is a relationship issue, a relationship to myself as the identity, my identity is changing and my relationship with myself is becoming different. And then the relationship with my partner becomes different. And then I start to worry about my relationship with my children. And so I started working with moms and their partners, working on the relationship aspects of this whole transition into parenthood. Matrescence and patrescence. You have probably been talking about these terms, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I actually had someone on probably a couple of months back. We dived into matrescence as well. So yeah, it's definitely a term I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Is that Amy Taylor Kabaz that you had on?
No, it was a woman. Her name was Kirsten. She's from the US. Yeah, yeah.
It's a good concept. I mean, it's very important that we talk about it because when you put a word to what's happening, when we have the language to be able to explain what is happening, we start to feel like it's more valid and we really begin to feel like we're not alone, that
Mm,
this whole change that's occurring is not just me in my own little bubble, that there's something really wrong with me, but there's actually a word for it. And people have been talking about this, and it's a process. It's something I can explain with a word now. So I start to feel less guilty.
mm, yeah. And look, I think as mothers, no one's really immune to mum guilt in many ways. And yeah, I guess we do experience it in so many different ways, and it can manifest in so many different ways. So I guess I'd love to hear a bit more about from your perspective and from your either your own personal experiences or from the mothers you've worked with. Like how would you explain, I guess, on a whole, what mum guilt is and why we actually experience it, why so many of us experience it, and I guess yeah, how you find it does typically manifest in daily life, because we don't often hear the term dad guilt. I mean, not saying dads don't feel guilty, but it's not really a term that's thrown out there a lot, right?
Mm. It
Mm.
isn't. We talk a lot about mom guilt. I'm sure that dads feel guilt. From what I've seen in my practice, they also feel guilt. It's a little bit harder for them to express it, and
Mm.
it's definitely less intense because society will make it be so that women have more guilt. There are way more expectations of women, whereas dad guilt is in a sense more recent because dads have now started to be uh, expected to be more involved. And so this is where it becomes it it was personal. I as a dad would feel guilty because I'm not as involved as I would want to be, but society kind of lets it slip because you're supposed to be the provider, you go to work and it's fine. So any guilt that a dad would have would be more so internal if they felt the need to be connected more to their children, but really it was okay if they weren't. Now dads are expected to be more involved, and so dad guilt is becoming more prevalent. But for women, mom guilt and mom shame more specifically, because guilt is not such a negative emotion. I don't like to call them negative, honestly, but it's not such a detrimental emotion. Guilt is that part of me that feels like I've done something wrong, and it's good if I fix it. So it's kind of like an alarm that this is not something that aligns with my values, and it would be better if I tried to fix it. Now what happens is when my values are very much interrelated with my mother's values and my grandmother's values and the society's values and whatever everybody else is expecting of me, there starts to be irrational expectations of what I should be doing, and this guilt turns into shame. I start to look outside of me and wonder, are they judging me? Have I done enough? Am I supposed to am I doing all that I'm supposed to be doing? And what happened is, from some point on, we were told that a good mother is supposed to be present all of the time. She's supposed to not only be present, but she's supposed to be calm all the time. She's supposed to be gentle all the time. At the same time, she's supposed to be able to do all the things. So while she's present, she's supposed to have the perfect household and she's supposed to have whole food and cook and clean and all these things while being present, and she's also not supposed to have any other thing that interests her more than motherhood. She's not supposed to need to go back to work anymore if she doesn't have to financially. She's not supposed to need to have hobbies or to go out with friends. She's now supposed to be 100% fulfilled by motherhood. So, with these expectations looming over us, no wonder that we start to feel guilty. Mothers feel guilty for just about anything. You can't really do anything, right? Can you? If you breastfeed too long, then you are ruining your child. If you choose not to breastfeed or you can't breastfeed or you choose to end it sooner than expected, and I don't know what that expected is, it depends on different countries. So some people will say, oh, it's 6 months because that's what the world organization says is the minimum, and it's very relative, but we make it be the general consensus. And so anything that we do becomes something that people judge us for, or we believe that people will judge us for because we see it around us. We're always very critical of mothers and their choices. And that creates a lot of guilt. And of course, to make a little bit like of a side note here, there are personal things that make us guilty as well. It's not just society and just the messages that we've been receiving. There are some personal traits that could make me more prone to be guilty. So if I'm a perfectionist, that will make me more prone to feel guilty because a lot of the things that would have been okay for someone else and would have been enough are not enough for me. That what I wanted to do as a mom and the way I wanted to show up as a mom is not the way I'm showing up. If I am the type of person that wants to know all the things, I feel like I've never read up on enough. I haven't taken enough courses. So there is that sense of not being enough. And if I'm carrying trauma, personal trauma or generational trauma, that I am not enough, then motherhood really triggers that and it brings it to the surface. And in this way, motherhood could be the space where we break down in guilt and shame and depression, or it could be our development because it brings up all these things that we thought we had gotten rid of, that we thought went away, and it puts them right in front of our face and says, solve them.
Yeah.
And it's not to the benefit just of our children, it's to our benefit too.
Mm, yeah. So much there. You pretty much answered like the first couple of questions I was going to ask you, which is perfect because it's all around, yeah, some of the sources where, I mean, like you said, we can pretty much feel mum guilt about anything and everything, and it can start from, you know, day dot when our child is born, when you mentioned breastfeeding and whether or not you do and for how long and all the things, and obviously through the different seasons and stages of our children as they grow up. I've got a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I mean, just reflecting on some of the times over the years, but in more recent times for me, it's really been around that I'm starting to reclaim my own identity, and it's that being okay with not necessarily like leaving my kids and doing stuff, but actually being like, I am a person outside of a mother, and that is okay. Like I am allowed to, and give myself permission to explore some of my passions, and even just find out some things that I enjoy to do and that bring me joy. And you know, that grappling with that, oh, but shouldn't motherhood be like the source of all my joy? And just really moving through some of those pieces, especially over the last couple of years, which has been a beautiful journey. It's been, and you know, we always, things will come up. I'm sure again it will come up in another point or another, but that's been something that's been really big for me the last couple of years. So yeah, it's definitely not something that, I mean, I'd love to say it will go away, but who's to know? Our kids are growing up, we're evolving with them, so it will probably come up in some way, shape, or form at another point in the future as well.
You're describing matrescence beautifully. That's exactly what it is, because it's not just a transition into motherhood. And so we tend to think, for those of us who realize that this is a process and that you're changing your whole and your entire identity changes. It's not just an extra role that you patch on and you say, "Oh, okay, I was pretty good at everything else I took on. I'm going to be good at this." Well, it's not about being good or bad, first of all. And second of all, this is not just another role that you take on that is separate from everything else. This is your identity shifting, and everything else around you is shifting along with this new identity that you have, because everything is affected. Your physical is affected, your mental, your emotional, the cultural, the social, the financial, who you are at work and what you want. That's why we find so many mothers leaving the workspace, because nothing changes in the workplace for them to accommodate for all the needs that they have now as mothers. They need more time with their kids. They need to be able to make sure that they're somewhere safe. They need so many things, but the workplace doesn't tend to accommodate for all of this, and it keeps on demanding more and more. And so, what you're saying is the matrescence part of it all is that we change not only at the beginning, but every phase that our children go through, we transition with them. And there is another identity change, and another, and another, and another. And so, it's been that's why it's called matrescence, because it sounds very similar to adolescence. And after adolescence, it's the biggest, well, actually, it is the biggest. It's these two are the very monumental changes to our identity. In adolescence, where we start to define ourselves as adults and what we want to do with our lives, and we become more independent. And in motherhood, where our identity takes a complete turn. And it's been described as a much bigger transition than adolescence is, but nobody's talking about it. Very few people are talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easy for someone like you, like people like you and me who are in that realm, are like, oh, well, we know all about it and stuff, but to, I guess, the average person, not so much. But yeah, so important to acknowledge this time in a woman's life when she does transition to the mother. I'd love to know from, I guess, your experiences working with parents, how does a mother's guilt and shame impact and affect her relationship, obviously not only with her children but with her partner as well, and I guess any examples you see how this might play out in family interactions?
Well, guilt and shame really drive our behaviors. So when we become very guilty and shameful as mothers, then this is what we will focus on. Our brain is wired anyway to focus on intense emotions. And so it kind of takes over. The emotion always takes over the logical part. So, in a sense, we can think of it in this way: we are not thinking straight. When we get into a mode where we are feeling guilty and shameful, what is happening is that our brain is trying to resolve this feeling. It's feeling a threat. And so it's trying to see what can be done in order to fix this. But usually that's not in a rational way. What happens, therefore, is we are not able to connect with our partner in the same way because we're so wrapped up in what's happening for us and how we need to fix it because we no longer want to feel this way. We don't want to be carrying this guilt and shame. And so you'll see a lot of women going into corrective behaviors or compensating, trying to do all the things that they're supposed to do. And the number one thing that I see is the loss of flexibility. And I heard this psychologist, I will not remember. I hear way too many podcasts and things, so I'm not going to remember who said it, and I'm sorry about that. But someone said that the number one indication of when someone's psychological issues have become a dysfunction, in a sense, where all of us have some kind of an issue at some point in the day or the month or the year. But what happens is it something that's functional? Is it something that I can move on with? Or has it become a problem for me? Is it causing me in my daily life an issue? And she said that the one indicator is how flexible am I? And so
Mm,
what guilt and shame, what I've seen it do is that it takes away our flexibility. And it what it makes us do is that we will focus only on all the things that are supposed to be done right. We start to believe that there is some kind of a manual, and we look for guidelines and we look for steps and procedures, ways to do things like we're supposed to. And we become fixated on this notion of doing things the right way. And so what happens there is we lose touch with ourselves for sure, because we are not even paying attention to our needs. We start to become martyrs because we think that this is what we're supposed to do as good mothers. And at the same time, we start to lose touch with our partners who are there and are wondering, what's happening? How can I lift something from you? There starts to be less trust. I cannot leave this with you because
mm,
I don't trust that you're going to do it exactly the way that I asked you to. So, and this is true. I see it a lot of times in sessions is that, oh, yeah, I want my husband to take the load off. However, I don't trust him to do it. You
mm,
don't trust him to do it, or you don't trust him to do it the way that you want it done, because those are very two different things.
mm,
And as a woman, I get, and I've been in that position. So I get every woman that steps into my world and tells me, yeah, but he won't do it the way that I want. I get you. I get you. I felt it. I know what you're talking about. However, when we get fixated on this, then we don't receive support. And
mm,
what happens, and then it trickles down. So then I feel that I'm not supported by my husband, and he feels like he's shut out, like he's not appreciated. He is no longer treated as an equal who knows things. She knows best, and just supposed to follow. I'm just supposed to apologize. I'm just supposed to listen. So he feels like he's shut out of the whole process, which then is going to create a ripple effect in its own way, in the way that he addresses her, he communicates with her, because he's hurt. He thinks he's being rejected, and she thinks she's not supported. She doesn't realize that she is contributing to not being supported in this scenario, right? Because there are real scenarios where the husbands aren't really available, either because they're working or because they have this notion that, this is a mother's job. So I'm not talking about those scenarios. I'm talking about another a scenario where the husband wants to be there and we're wondering, but why is the relationship suffering? How could the guilt and shame be contributing? It's because she has come to a point where she believes, through because of her guilt and shame, that there are only specific ways that things are supposed to be done, and she is looking for a way out, and she doesn't think that he can help her find the way out. She thinks that she's alone in this. And so she shuts him out and she shuts her needs out. And she is very focused on resolving the particular problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that too. And what about with kids then? How does mum guilt and shame then have a trickle effect onto, a mother's relationship with her children?
Well, if we think about it this way, if I am all consumed in doing the right things and I have become inflexible and I'm very harsh on myself with every little thing that doesn't get done right, then inevitably I start to become inflexible and harsh with my children. So while I'm working really hard to be the gentle parent and the understanding parent and all of these things, I'm much more prone to snapping, for example, because I am in distress all the time. This is, if you really, really think about it, this is as if like I'm in alert mode. This is a crisis situation inside me. The guilt and the shame are feelings that are not to joke about. If I'm feeling them constantly, I really need them to go away. So, am I really able to show up and be present for my children when all I can think about is, am I doing the right thing right now by my daughter? Am I doing the right thing by my son? Am I showing up the way I'm supposed to? Did I do this activity? Did I make this new thing? Am I stimulating them enough for their brain? Did I read that book on happy children and the Danish and how they do it? And all of if this is all going on in your head, how are you really showing up for your kids? You're not there 100%.
No.
And at the very least, you're not present. And afterward, when you realize this, then you have more guilt and shame piling on, right? But at the worst case scenario, there are way more communications that are more intense, where you will snap, where you will yell, and you will wonder, why did I do that? I know not to do it. And I was so in my head about this, and I told myself I wouldn't do it again. Why did it happen? Because you're constantly under stress because of that shame that you feel and that need that you're supposed to be this specific, very specific, perfect way.
Mm, yeah. Super mum. Super mum.
Exactly.
Is unachievable, let's face it, and unrealistic. You can be a super mum without having to be perfect.
The thing is that the super moms, sorry,
No, no, no.
the thing is that super moms is the thing is the caveat there. You can be a super mom, but does that align with also being an amazing woman?
Mm,
And there happens the problem. So you can, in a sense, I'm not supporting putting the goal of being a super mom, but you can perfect motherhood in a way and really focus on that and just do this. But is that really possible ever? If you think that about the fact that we are multi-layered people,
mm,
human beings. So as much as you want to ignore it, you will have a need for something else.
yeah.
Before kids, you were someone else. That old self hasn't died. It's there. It's part of you. And if it's unacknowledged, it will keep on pushing back. It will create tension within. There will be internal tension. And at the same time, there's also, so society tells us to be a certain way so that we can be seen as super moms, but society will also tell us that to be respectable human being and a woman that supports feminism and other women, we're supposed to want to be ambitious and we're supposed to want to go back to work and we're supposed to want to achieve other things besides motherhood. Otherwise, what did the feminists fight for? Do you see? And so these are very conflicting messages that we receive. There's no way to really get it right. So, okay, goal, be a super mom, but how about the other thing? Is it not going to affect you? The other expectations.
Mm,
They don't exist in a vacuum, is
yeah.
what I would say.
Yeah, that's right. We can drive ourselves mad trying to be the super mom, and then it was like, oh, but what about the rest of me? And I always speak about, we are multifaceted, like you said, multi-layered beings as humans, and it's something that I've really intellectually I knew this, but just more recently, it's like I said before, that permission slip to then step outside of that role as a mother. And I'm obviously different to how I was when I was in my 20s, but like you said, that part of me is still there. It's just evolved in a different way, and to start exploring different things that light a fire in my belly, because there are so many things. I am also multi-passionate. There are so many things that I love to do, and I love working in my business. I love dancing. I love so many different things. And I also love being a mother. So we don't have to just be one thing. And I think that's something that I've really just grounded in myself more recently, just being, yeah, you know what? I'm not one thing. I'm not one role. I wear many hats, yes, but I'm also someone at my core, and I have an essence that desires to come out and explore my surroundings and my human experience. So I love that you also mentioned that as well. But yeah, it is a bit of a conundrum, this back and forth between the expectations as women that are placed on us and conditioned in us from such a young age as well. So it can be a tricky thing to navigate, I think.
Yeah. And the important thing is to know that in all of this, you're not breaking your children. So
Mm,
when we come at these crossroads and we finally start to accept that, I'm not just a mom and that's okay and it's fine that I have these needs, then comes that question in our head, but when I do all these things, I am not there with my children. Does that make do I break them? Do
mm,
I cause them an issue because it's so ingrained that you need to be with them as much as possible all day if you could? And there's this surge of, let's also mention the homeschooling as well. And I don't think it's bad or good. I'm not judging it. But I am just noticing as an outsider that we are becoming even more involved as a way to keep our children safe, as a way to control what it is they learn and how it is that they learn it, as a way that we can be more present. So
mm.
it becomes an issue of quantity, that the more I am there, the more I am a good mom. And then even if I come to accept the fact that I am multi-layered and I have interests and I have all these things, it comes in clear contrast with the need to be with my children because that's what I'm told. I need to be with them as much as possible, just even being in the same room with them in order to be considered a good mother. So it's really important to reconcile all of these things and to recognize, as a first step, to recognize what's happening, that
Yeah,
there are very conflicting messages that we receive, and it's not actually ever possible that we reconcile all of these things at the same time. We need to be able to make clear choices, because what I see in my practice a lot of times, and something that I felt honestly before getting into this space and I had to really work through myself, is the feeling of being trapped. A lot of times we just feel trapped in everything that we do. So I choose to be home with my son, but I feel trapped in that choice because, in essence, I feel like I'm supposed to do that. Otherwise, I'll be judged as a bad mother. And maybe this is not a very conscious thought. Maybe it's subconscious, but I'm being driven by this perception that if I put him in daycare, then it has to be explainable in some way, shape, or form, because otherwise I'm a bad mother. There
yeah,
has to be like a specific need. That's just an example. And so I make this choice to stay home, but inside me, I feel like it was forced upon me, because anything else that I would have done would have been judged by my family, by the outside world, by friends, by whoever. And
yeah,
so I feel it's not a choice. I feel trapped. And what's really empowering is to just look from the outside in and see all the things that are expected, understand that we can't do it all, and make a decision about what we want to do in the now, and to know that later you might change that position. You might decide a year or 2 years from now something different, and that's also okay. But that it's my decision. I chose to stay home because I want to do this, because I realize that I can't also be a career woman at the same time the way that I want to do it. And doesn't have to be either or. I choose to spend this much time with my children and spend this much time in my career. The problem is that we don't make it a clear choice and we start to feel trapped.
Mm,
And while we are making choices to do things a certain way, we are also, instead of feeling great, like, oh, look, I set this goal about the way that I want, let's say, to show up for my children, and I did it. But instead of feeling that, we're feeling awful and we're wondering why. But you did it from a place of having to do it, of
yeah.
feeling like you couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. There was the pressure behind it.
Mm.
So for mothers who, which at some point we do, but to be able to sort of manage and overcome these feelings of guilt and shame, what would be, I guess, some simple practical strategies that you recommend to mothers when you're working with them, or even specific techniques or exercises or whatever it may be?
Well, the first thing is this, to be a little bit more informed about what it is that's happening, to understand, to listen to podcasts like yours, and to understand that this is a normal part of the process, that most mothers feel this way because we have this feeling that even when we hear that other mothers are struggling, we don't really believe it. But to understand that this is a process that all of us go through to some degree, and it
Mm,
will affect each of us in a different to a different extent in different areas. So some of us will be more affected in, let's say, the physical, and others will be more affected in the financial, others will be more affected in the emotional. But it affects all of us in some shape or form. So the first step is to really understand what's happening and what's expected. Then it would be to make a more empowered choice about what it is that I'm doing now, and in that, what's the hidden message is to be kind, graceful, and compassionate with ourselves about the choice that we're making in the now, and that nothing is set in stone, and that nothing is right or wrong. There's what's right for me in the now. And maybe in the future, I'll look back and say, maybe that wasn't the best route, but it was right then. Back then, when I was making the decision, it felt right. And so I can live with that and I can accept it. I can treat myself with kindness and grace. So I am the type of person that looks for guidelines and steps and procedures. And while I can provide some of them, what will truly help is less of that and more of compassion for ourselves and where we're at and what we've been trying to do this far, and being kind as to why that's happening, first and foremost, to kind of ask ourselves, what have I been trying to achieve? What am I afraid of? What am I protecting myself from by putting this guilt and shame forward? Because we think that the guilt and the shame comes from something else and it's external, but a lot of times we are creating the guilt and the shame as a protective factor for something, from something even worse. So for example, this would be, I feel very guilty about not having done these things as a mother. And I will hold on very subconsciously to this guilt, and I will keep on tripping over this guilt. And I'm ruining all the things that we talked about in my relationship with myself, with my children, with my husband. But that is better than to drop the guilt, because I fear that if I do, I will be completely incompetent. I will break my kids. I will not show up. I will not do anything. I have this distrust in myself that if I don't whip myself with guilt and shame, then I won't be at all good at anything. So I
mm,
have this conviction that the guilt and the shame actually drive me to be the best that I could be, and I hold on to them like a badge of honor. All
mm,
of this very subconscious. And so the practical strategies, yes, I have created myself. I've created a self-connect calendar. I don't call it self-care. It irks me, the self-care industry. I can't say self-care, and it really isn't a self-care calendar. It's a self-connect calendar where we connect. It helps us with daily small things, activities that we could do. So that would be something practical, small activities like mindfulness, like journaling, like deep breathing, like lighting a candle, because we tell mothers go do self-care and then we suggest that they take a spa day. I haven't, my son is 5. I still haven't left him for more than 5 hours at a time somewhere, you know, and the 5 hours I only allowed myself to do it because it was work. You know, so
Yeah.
you tell me as self-care to go take a spa day. I think it's completely berserk. I'm not ready for that. And some mothers might be from the second day that they give birth and others aren't. So it's I'm very careful about the suggestions and the practical advice that I give, because when you're doing it broadly to an audience that you know nothing about, each mother is different and what she's comfortable with is different. And the spa day that I used as an example, it can make her feel like there's something wrong with her because she can't take the spa day. So she's
Mm.
not judging the woman that did take it. She's judging herself because she didn't take it. And what's wrong with me that I can't step away a little? So I've created that self connect calendar because, in essence, if we connect back to ourselves and we start to feel more confident and more grounded and more centered, then all the other things that we want to do, the practical ways that we want to show up, these are going to be the result
Yeah.
of that. But yeah, like the things that I include there are practical steps that moms can do. It would be nice to have a 1 minute meditation.
Mm.
And when people say meditation, everybody thinks, oh, I can't sit there for 15 minutes, my kids are going to barge in. No, 1 minute, like right after they've gone to sleep and you know they won't be waking up at least for another half hour, give yourself that 1 minute. Give yourself the time to, in the morning before everything starts going crazy in the house, give yourself the time to light that candle whose smell makes you feel so good. And it is a form of caring for myself, because that smell as I pass by in the chaos of the day, it's going to give me that feeling of I did something for myself. I lit this candle. I
Yeah.
have this scent. Put a cream on. So for everybody, it's going to be different, but maybe like putting your hand cream in the morning or at nighttime can feel like something that was so pampering, and it takes only a second, but you haven't done it. Why? So
Mm.
these are like very small things that we can start doing, and we can do it gradually. So, in working with our mind, being kind and trying to figure out the deeper roots of why we're holding on to this shame and guilt, at the same time, we can also work backwards by doing very, very small things that won't go against our self punishing. Because a lot of times the self care is so difficult to do because we self punish
Mm.
because of that guilt and that shame.
Yeah. So many gold nuggets there. And I love that you mentioned self-compassion, because that's something I speak so much to, and around, cultivating self-compassion and practicing it in different ways. I use a lot of mantras, and a big one for me has always been I'm doing the best I can, like just in every given moment with the resources I have available to me, just reminding myself. And yeah, leaning on that mantra has been a huge one for me over the last, well, probably 3 years, more so since having 2 children, going from 1 to 2 children when things become a little bit more chaotic. And also with the self-care piece as well, it's not a term I particularly like either. I use nourishment, like self-nourishment, and very similar to you, recommending ways that we can just utilize small pockets of time throughout our day to engage in mindfulness activities or whatever it may be. But the funny thing is, the hand cream one is my thing that I do at the end of the night, literally before I turn my light off. And it's like a lemon myrtle smell. And I'm like, smells so good. And it's just, yeah, all those small little things that we can do for ourselves, and they just over time can have such a cumulative effect. And yeah, just doing those small things for ourselves, which we might think it's not going to make a difference, but speaking from my own personal experience, I know how much of a difference it can make. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
something
that.
as small as that, like even putting lipstick on, because I think that's also become an issue. It's kind of like, oh, are you asking us women when we're going through all of this to look beautiful? And it's not about putting on makeup and looking beautiful for anyone. If it speaks to you,
Mm,
then it could be it's symbolic to I also did something for me,
yes.
and it is a nice way to do it, to say that I had just 30 seconds and that's all I could do, but I did it. I used those 30 seconds
Mhm.
for myself, and I'm important. And like you said, it has a cumulative effect. because
Yeah.
that you do that for yourself. And at the same time, I think we forget that this is also something that we reflect back to our children.
Mm,
So you are giving your child all the attention and all the love and all the presence and your entire world. But then what do they see as the way that you treat yourself?
yeah.
And if you keep on putting yourself in the background, what do they learn about love? Love is only giving,
Mm-hmm.
and love is being self-sacrificial. And so when they grow up and they end up with a person who is taking advantage of them, we wonder why. Well, that's what they saw is love. They're showing their love by giving everything away and not taking, because there's something wrong with taking. My mom never took.
Mm-hmm.
She
Mm-hmm.
never allowed herself to take. And so I think we guilt trip ourselves into not doing anything at all besides being mothers and pouring all of our love and attention into our children. And what we don't realize is that our children learn by watching us.
That's
And
right.
so they're learning something beautiful about the love and the giving that they see from us. But then how do we treat ourselves? That's how they learn to treat themselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%, 100%. We're modeling to them, they're they're sponges and they're seeing that. And there's times where, I go and do stuff, and particularly my eldest, and he had a moment a few weeks ago, and I never go out, very rarely go out at night, let's just say that. And I'd booked for my birthday to go to an event, and he wasn't happy about it. And I had quite a, he's old enough now, he's 10, to have pretty decent conversation. And I acknowledged his feelings. Yeah, I know you don't want mum to go out. And I spoke to him, sometimes we do things for ourselves, and I want to show them that it's okay to do that. And when you grow up, you'll want to do things for yourself. And so just really, I'm so aware of that now, and just modeling to them that self-love piece and doing things for ourselves is okay. It doesn't mean I love you any less or anything like that, but I also love myself, and I actually deserve to do nice things for myself as well.
Well, I'm very glad you did that.
I was like, I'm still going. I'm still.
I'm going anyway.
But it was a good conversation piece anyway, a good learning moment, I felt, good teachable moments. And
Yes.
sharing that resource of yours as well. I will pop that in the show notes. But just to finish up, I would love to hear anything more about any offerings of yours that you'd like to share, or how people might get in touch with you. And I can pop a little bit in the show notes as well. But feel free to share anything else.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I have that self-connect calendar. It's on my website, markellakaplani.com/self-connect calendar. And I also have, for the moms that are interested, I have a short mini video series. It's kind of like a mini course that is offered for free, with small videos, because we're all so very busy, that talks about matrescence. So that first step that I talked about learning about what's happening to us so that we can normalize and validate all the feelings that we're feeling. That is something that they can do for free by going and downloading my video series. So it's at markellakaplani.com/video series. And they will receive the total of 5 mini videos in their email over 5 days. And yeah, I work with moms and I work with couples in helping rebuild that connection with ourselves, with our partners, and then to really feel like we're showing up the way that we want for our children by doing all that work.
Amazing. Such beautiful offerings that you've got. And I'm actually really keen to check out your Self Connect calendar now as well. So thank you so much, Markella, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. There were so many gold nuggets there. And yeah, it's such a topic that I love to chat about and hear more about from other people. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was wonderful to speak with you and talk about this topic. It's very dear to my heart.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, everyone. And I will speak to you all on next week's episode.